Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Merrimack Village District to order. And before I start, I would like to announce I am opening the ballot boxes at 7:03 and inform everyone that the first absentee ballots will be processed no sooner than 9:03, and the ballot boxes will remain open until after the absentee ballots are processed and everyone in the room has voted. So it will be at least 9:03. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Registered voters should have 3 pieces of paper: your voting card, the official ballot, and this green ballot. You'll need those as the night goes along. The ballot boxes are already open and you're free to put in your ballots whenever you wish. I would suggest that you wait until we discuss Article 4, and at which time I will suggest you go put your ballots in the box. At that time, I'll hold off moving to Article 5 until everyone's back into their seats. As usual, each article on the warrant will be moved and seconded. In the past, the articles have been read as printed and then the motion to move. This year, we're going to hold off and read the articles right before we do the vote. So if there's any changes, those will be read into the record that way. Once the article has been moved and seconded, discussion begins. The voter who moved the article is the first to discuss and comment on it. Anyone else in the room can then come up and comment, which is you're going to come up to the microphone there, state your name, hold your card up and your address, and when recognized, you can speak. If you're making an amendment, your amendment will need to be seconded, and at which point discussion will occur on the amendment. And we will then have that discussion. When it's done, we will vote on it. Voting is a majority. And that goes on until we're done and we get back to the original article, and then we vote on the article. Please limit your time at the microphone to 3 minutes. The votes are done by raising your card in favor and against. For Article 3, I will need you to hold your cards up in the air a little bit longer. We have such a huge audience here. I will need to count the number of yeses and nos, as that article requires a 2/3 majority. The rest of the articles are simple passing, so if I see enough cards in either direction, I won't need to count. It's Merrimack, be polite. If you have a phone, please put it on vibrate. If you need to take a call, please head outside. And I think that's about it for all the pieces I need to talk about. At this point, I would like to recognize Don Provencher, Chair, to introduce the front table.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Brian. So to introduce the members here, we have on my far left is Michelle Holton, the Human Resource and Finance Director. Carrie Roman with Drummond Woodsum, our MVD's attorney. Ron Miner, Superintendent. Paul McLaughlin, Commissioner. And to my immediate right, Ken Ayers, Commissioner. I'm sorry, my left. And to my right is John Lyons, Commissioner. Wolf von Schaun is the 5th Commissioner, and he's excused tonight because he's stranded in Germany, and there is a transportation strike, so his flight got canceled, and there's no transportation out of Germany. So he's stuck there until the strike is over and he can get a flight back. So he apologizes, but obviously it's out of his control. And I'm Don Provencher, the chair of the board.
All right, thank you. At this time, I think we have someone who wants to,
Right.
point of order, or,
Right, so there's a point of order to be made here. You know, Articles 1 and 2 are for voting for the different positions. I want to make a motion to approve the consideration of Article 3 before Article 4, which sounds like a silly request, but that is best explained by our attorney, Carrie Ann Roman.
So Article 4 is a money article, and it's a multi-year money article. And so the RSA 3833 requires multi-year money articles to be the first article voted on after the election of officials. But it's not. It comes below Article 3. And the reason for that is because the Department of Revenue said they wanted Article 3 first, because Article 3 and Article 4 are linked. And so we're making this motion, even though it seems obvious, so that we can comply with the statute. So you would be voting to approve the motion to take Article 3 first before Article 4, and that also lets us comply with DRA's request.
do I have a second for the motion? All right, second, Lynn Christensen. Any other discussion on it, or was that enough?
I think that was sufficient.
That was sufficient? Okay. All in favor of adjusting, please raise your cards. Thank you. All those opposed? Motion passes. Let's start discussing Article 3. Don?
Sure. Shall the Merrimack Village District vote to change the purpose of the existing emergency water and/or operations and maintenance of GAC treatment facilities non-capital reserve fund created by warrant Article 6 at the March 2021 annual meeting to the purchase of water and/or operations and maintenance of GAC treatment facilities non-capital reserve fund, and to name the commissioners as agents to expend from said fund. A two-third majority vote is required. This was previously approved by, recommended by the Board of Commissioners in a vote 4-0-0, and it's reviewed by the Department of Revenue Administration.
Okay, so that is a motion to
Right.
bring Article 3 to the table. Do I have a second? Do we have a second? Is there any discussion from the body on Article 3? Just, I see you there, Tom.
I hate to have to stand up and ask this, but can you explain what's going on here for us a little bit better? She said there was a connection to the next article, but, you know, just reading the article didn't necessarily make that clear. What is changing, what's different, why are we doing this?
Right. Carrie, do you feel that you're capable of explaining that answer a little better than I am?
Unless you want to, I can.
I can do it.
Okay.
So if Article 4 passes and we enter into contract with Penachuk, we plan to go to the capital reserve account for the purchase of the water. So the money would be coming out of that article, that account for the purchase of the contract water for the first year.
And then Article 3, which is the Capital Reserve Fund, when it was initially adopted, it didn't specifically include the purchase of water as a purpose. So Article 3 is asking to add, as part of the Capital Reserve Fund purpose, the purchase of water. And so if you approve that, it's changing the Capital Reserve Fund. And then it would allow, in Article 4, if that passes, it would then allow the purchase of water. So that's how they're linked.
Rothhouse, 14 Kittredge Lane. For me, the difficulty is not knowing, because I don't pay attention to your meetings as closely as I should. I don't know at Article 4 why we are needing to purchase from Pennachuck, so for me to make this vote in a constructive way, I kind of have to understand Article 4 first. So I don't know if that's possible, or if there could be a simple explanation so I get a good grasp of that.
Yeah, I can answer the question about why we need to purchase water from Pennachuck. We're basically short 500,000 gallons a day in our source capacity for peak summer demands, and there's no other available sources in the Merrimack system at this point. So what we're planning on doing is to get into a wholesale agreement from Nashua, Pennachuck, for 3 years, and that will be a bridge. So over the next 3 years, we're looking at increasing our source capacity from in-town supplies. So that's going to take 3 years for that to happen. So there's a bridge to get to that point. We're asking to purchase water from Pennachuck and Nashua. So we want this to be out of the Capital Reserve Fund.
Longwoods to Arbor Street, Merrimack. My blue card's at my seat. If you want me to get it, I will.
We're good.
Okay. It begs the question, you say we're 500,000 gallons short on peak day. In the last 5 years, have we exceeded peak day?
We have. The peak demand is about 5.2 million gallons a day, and I believe we have exceeded that in 2020. We had to shut down irrigation during COVID, and that's a practice that we're trying to plan for so that we don't have to do that again.
And if we get to Article 4, and maybe I'm asking the question prematurely, but the contract is for the 297 plus whether or not we use a gallon?
That 297, it includes using 250,000 gallons a day over 365 days a year. That price is factored into that. So when I say we're short 500,000 gallons a day, it gives us the ability that we can use up to 500,000 gallons a day peak, but on average, it's 250,000 gallons a day. So for half the year, we can use 500,000 gallons a day, and that averages out to 250,000 gallons a day over 365 days a year. So that allows us to meet our 500,000 gallon peak in the summer.
I may be back. I'll listen if there's discussion about 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chris Christensen, 27 Greatstone Drive. I think this will come out in the discussion of Article 4, but the question at this point is, if we're changing the purpose of the Capital Reserve Fund, will there be sufficient funds in there for the original purpose? Or are we going to draw it down too much and not be adequately funded for the original purpose that fund was established for?
Yes, my understanding is there will be sufficient funds. I don't know if Michelle or Ron has any more specific numbers to address on that, but I do believe both purposes can be funded out of that account.
For the first year with the transfer to capital reserves that follows on the warrant, Article 7, with that additional 150,000, that would cover our first year. And with the finalization of our FY '22 budget, we had unrestricted net position of 2.9 million, so we have the leeway to next year put further funds into that reserve account to cover
Do you have
the two additional
the
payments.
total that's in there now?
Yes.
the card.
Are we set with that answer? All set down there?
She's getting the total.
Okay, hold on.
The rate that we're purchasing the wholesale agreement is considerably less than the retail rate that Nashua customers are paying for Pennachuck. And if we have those numbers, that might be good to share. I don't know them off the top of my head, but
So the rate that warrant Article 4 was, for the water was 0.9403 cents per 100 cubic feet. And our typical wholesale rate, I want to say it's $4, or right around $4 for 100 cubic feet. So it's a considerable savings going this route.
yes, and our current rate for what we charge for the water, I believe, is $3.14, right? So we're selling it for a lot more than we're buying it, and we're buying it for a lot cheaper than Nashua's residents are buying Pennachuck water for. So it's 0.94 cents versus, what did you say, Ron, $4 is the retail rate for Pennachuck?
I believe it's $4. We're going to have an amendment to Article 4. It does change the dollar amount, and the numbers are more conservative, but the actual rate on the amended numbers is 1.0391%.
Go ahead. Name and
Lorene Allen, 16 French Court. I want to thank you all before I say anything about all the work you've done. You know what a journey we've been on the last few years. Historically, the MVD's job was to supply us with water, which, as we hear tonight, is not so simple with growing demands. Ideally, we would have this community that would really focus more on water conservation. That was going on in the 90s when my kids were young, and the schools were really pushing it, and community. I see irrigation systems running at times that are not necessary, watering too shallow, et cetera. So I just kind of put that out there to anybody who's listening, even on the recording. As a community, if we can really pay attention to use of irrigation in particular, I would assume that was a big use. And water conservation, there's a better way to do this. Maybe we can do that. That being said, I want to thank all of you that, in addition to water supply, you tuned in several years ago to water quality, in addition to the health impacts from PFAS, at a time where our state didn't have the guidance, or federal government is 20 years ago, this should have been grappled with. We discovered, what we were drinking in our water, and you have all tackled that in a way that has really listened to people and listened to the health impacts, which was never your job. Your job was supplying water, keeping your infrastructure healthy, watching out for bacteria and pHs and salt and all that other stuff that's in there. So that being said, you know the state of the science, New Hampshire, 12 parts. You've worked really hard to get all the wells on track, for being filtered. You've heard the public saying we really don't want any exposure, which is at odds of what your job is, Ron, is to follow the law, right? And you've done that. And now we have Pennachuck's water, right? So while we understand we need more water, I get that, and drought and consumption you can't control. So, New Hampshire is sitting at 12. The EPA tomorrow formally opens the public comment period for rulemaking for 4 parts for trillion for PFOA alone. PFOS is the same, and a new hazardous index, which they will build upon in the next few years, adding more PFAS to that. Currently, I've done the math and looked at all our wells. It doesn't impact you at all. So one less thing to hear about. So Pennachuck is going to need to get in compliance. I've heard numbers there sitting 9 to 11 parts, which puts them legal for New Hampshire, but not okay with the new national standards that will be arriving in about a year. Of course, there'll be legal action, but I think the EPA will prevail. So what is the plan for looking at the water that you're delivering, which is excellent quality as it can be in this day and age, above and beyond, what you need to do, and we all appreciate that. So Pennachuck comes into the system. You don't get to choose which water they send you, right? Your connections go to certain delivery systems. I'm sure you know that. So what do we do if the Pennachuck water is adding PFAS to our system, knowing we need water, and that's the only water we get, and they won't get in compliance till they have to? And don't they have that new program that pulls from the Merrimack River? And I think that water is coming in lower than maybe where some of the areas that you get it. That's my understanding. So I just want to understand more about, have you talked about that, or have you talked to Pennachuck? And kind of, the public has been clear where we stand on this issue, but you need water, so at least we can be transparent and talk about it and know there's a long-term plan beyond the 3 years or 2 years. It will all be better eventually, but right now, as a community, we do not need any more exposure to these chemicals that the government is telling us are not safe at any level, is what they're acknowledging now. So.
Yeah, so right now, all of Merrimack's source water is being treated. The last treatment plant just came online last week, basically. So all of our wells in Merrimack are treated. There's no PFOA going into the system, as you're aware. There is low-level PFOA in Nashua's water. That is a consideration that the voters here tonight are going to have to weigh. That is going to be weighed against the real possibility of having to go into water restrictions this summer. So that's just kind of a trade-off that we wanted to put to the voters. It has to go to the voters because it's a multi-year agreement. And what we're looking to do, as I mentioned previously, is this is considered to be a 3-year bridge. Over those 3 years, we're looking into moving forward with artificial recharge at wells 4 and 5, where you take Merrimack River water, recharge the aquifer at wells 4 and 5. That will allow us to draw more water from wells 4 and 5 so that we can maximize the treatment plant that we have there at wells 4 and 5. Right now, the treatment plant is capable of treating 1,000 gallons per minute, but we can realistically only pump about 625 gallons per minute. So that artificial recharge is something that we're going to implement. All of that water is still going to be treated. The other option that we're considering moving forward with is Mitchell Woods, that was tested just a year or two ago and does not have any detectable PFAS. So those two sources will be PFAS-free, either through treatment or just ambient water at Mitchell Woods. And the plan would be to have those, one or both of those, online within the next 3 years, so that when the 3-year wholesale agreement with Pennachuck runs out, we don't need to import any more water from Pennachuck on a wholesale basis. There'll always be a backup for emergency purposes. And at that point, we would be able to say that all water in Merrimack will be PFOA-free as soon as we expire the wholesale agreement with Nashua. So this is just a bridge to get us through the next 3 years. And the concern is if we don't have this wholesale agreement, there's just a good chance we're going to have to go into water restrictions. It's highly dependent on whether we go into drought conditions, but that's basically, you can't plan for that. So we're trying to be prudent. The planning board has sent letters to the village district highly recommending that we get rid of the odd-even irrigation because they want more water capacity. I don't think this board is going to do that. We're going to keep the odd-even irrigation in place, but there is some strong, push to get more source capacity in this town. Development is increasing. That's not going to stop, so we need to be prudent, because if we don't do anything, then we're going to be facing the real possibility of more and more restrictions. So that's what you're going to need to weigh as a voter, is the quality of water coming from Nashua. It is detectable PFOA. It's compliant. There's no water out there that meets the EPA's health advisory for PFOA because you can't even measure that low. So this is why we're here to vote on this. Those are the things you need to balance when you make this vote.
Can I ask, just for my own benefit, for my consumption, do you know the levels that will be coming in from Nashua approximately? You know, because they vary and fluctuate, I know that. And and of course it comes into our system, so it will be diluting and blending, right? It's not going to be what comes in from Nashua we're consuming. And naively, I'm sure the answer is no. I don't think you have a way to pipe that water into one of your well areas that you can magically filter it. No, because the pipes aren't there. Yeah, that was, I know, you never know. So do you know the numbers of what you're purchasing from Pennachuck for PFAS levels?
Yeah, generally they're in the single digits of parts per trillion for
That 9 to
PFOA.
11, right, is my understanding?
Yeah, I mean, they've been as low as the low single digits. They've been high as like 11. We've tested it in the past. We're not necessarily testing the water from Pennachuck anymore because we're not pumping water from Pennachuck right now. So the DES and Nashua Pennachuck's website themselves, if you look for the core system, what they call the core system, that's the water that we're getting. And the last recollection I have is it's basically in the mid-single digits of parts per trillion PFOA that will be diluted with the water that comes from our own wells. You know, it may still be detectable for sure in some parts of our distribution system, but as the water goes more north, it should drop. The PFOA level will drop because there's more water being produced in the north side of town and the central part of town.
Thank you.
So-
I would just remind the public, a good way to handle this if you're concerned about exposure, instead of buying more plastics, is to spend $200 on an APEC or some other system for RO at your kitchen sink. If you can install it, fabulous. If not, pay the plumber, and that will give you the best. You can be assured that there's nothing in their short chains and all the others that aren't regulated. But thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments or questions on Article 3? Seeing none, I would like to have a vote on Article 3, and this time I need you to hold the cards up for a little bit. I need to count. So all in favor of Article 3? Thank you. All opposed? I don't need to do the math. That passes. 2/3. 14-2. Now we're going to move on to Article 4, which I have listed as Ken.
Shall Merrimack Village District vote to enter a multi-year contract for the supplement water with Pennachuck Waterworks in a total of $892,102 paid over 3 years starting in July 1st, 2023 in the 2023/2024 fiscal year ending on June 30th, 2026 in the 2025-2026 fiscal year, with each annual payment of the amount of $297,368, and to raise the appropriate the sum of $297,368 for the first year's payment for the purpose, with said funds to come from the GAC Treatment Facility Non-Capital Reserve Fund. If Article 3 fails, the $297,368 will come from unassigned fund balance.
So you move that to the floor? Say yes. Yes. Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Thank you. Is there discussion on Article 4?
Yes, I'd like to put forth a amendment.
Name? Just-
Paul McLaughlin, Commissioner.
Thank you.
326 Mabusick Lake Road. I have an amendment, a possible amendment for Article 4, and it should read, shall the Merrimack Village District vote to enter into a multi-year contract for supplemental water with Pennachuck Waterworks in the total amount of $947,204 paid over 3 years, starting on July 1st, 2023 in the 2023 to 2024 fiscal year and ending on June 30th, 2026 in the 2025-2026 fiscal year, with the first annual payment in the amount of $309,519 and to raise and appropriate the sum of $309,519 for the first year's payment for that purpose, with said funds to come from the GAC Treatment Facilities Non-Capital Reserve Fund. If Article 3 fails, the $309,519 will come from unassigned fund balance. So essentially, we're trying to make this into a more conservative outlook, since it's currently before the PUC. Ron, if you want to...
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Got that? All right. For my own record, could you read those last two large numbers?
The last two large numbers?
The last two large numbers there, yes.
Yeah, so essentially the total
Appropriate the
amount...
sum of it reads right now 297,368, and you want that to read?
We want that to read $309,519.
Thank you.
And the total sum amount will be changing from, or proposed to be changed from $892,102 and change that to $947,204.
Okay, thank you. So any other discussion on this? On the amendment, yes. All right, we are voting to amend. Does anyone need those numbers read again? Please say no. Yeah, of course. All right. All right, so we are voting on changing those the bottom line to 309,515 and 947,204. All in favor, raise your cards. Thank you. All opposed? Motion passes. We're now discussing Article 4 as amended. Any discussion? I see you guys lining up.
Hi, Finley Rothaus, 14 Kittredge Lane. I think my concern tonight is that when we plan, we should be anticipating these type of things. And over the years, you always hear people say, do we have enough water for the projects that are going up in town? And you've always said yes. In saying yes, you should have anticipated this possible shortfall that now puts us in a position where we have to purchase water from outside of our service area. That's not good planning, in my opinion, and I apologize, but I just wish this would have happened differently. You could have told the planning board, we don't have enough right now, and these projects may have been delayed a little. I have no problems with the apartments or anything that's going on in town. Been here for a while, and I think the change has been overall positive, and so the projects that happen are good if we had the water. Since we didn't, I'm now not in favor of this, I'm sad to say, but I wish we would have planned more appropriately.
Thank you.
Tom Koenig, 1 Danforth Road. I'm trying to understand this article a little bit better because it starts out saying, shall we vote to enter a contract which will cost us a certain amount of money that we just changed the number on. And then on the second page it says, if this fails, we'll spend this money anyway, but we'll get it from unassigned fund balance. Does that mean we're entering the contract regardless of whether this passes or fails?
No, Tom, it just means where the money's coming from. So in other words, if we want to do Article 4, but Article 3 fails, then we can't take the money from the capital reserve. It's got to come from somewhere else.
That's not what this article says.
That's what you just said to me. What do you mean?
It says right here,
Okay.
shall we vote to enter a multi-year contract? So if it fails, we don't enter the contract. But on the second
If 4
page, it
fails, we
says,
don't enter the contract.
on the second page here, it says,
What are you talking about?
if Article 3 fails. I'm sorry, I misread that.
That's all right.
So if Article 3 had failed, you would end up taking the money from unassigned fund balance. Just out of curiosity, because it mentions unassigned fund balance a couple of times, do we know how much is in the unassigned fund balance?
At the end of fiscal year 2022, we are at 2.9.
2.9 million?
2.9 million. We have 200,000 in this non-capital reserve account at present, with another 150,000 being asked to transfer in this warrant to cover that first payment.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else comment on Article 4 as amended?
Just to clarify, my understanding is if Article 4 fails, we are not buying any water from Nashua. Everybody understands that? Okay.
Okay. With that, this is where you use your green card, and green card. You get to, I hope we have some markers around somewhere. And they go in the box back there. So I'll take a little break here if you want to cast those ballots now. And we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you. All right, I'd like to continue now. We're moving on with Article 5.
I guess so. All right.
Yep, you're good.
To see if the Merrimack District will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $6,019,666 for general municipal operations for the 2023-2024 fiscal year, with said sum to come from water-related charges. This article does not include appropriations contained in special or individual articles addressed separately.
Thank you. So you are moving that to the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. All set? Yes? Good. All right. Any discuss? Oh, go ahead. Discuss. Any other discussion on Article 5?
Good.
Any questions from the floor on Article 5?
Paul McKelly, 17 Mile Point. In this article, what are the raises for your employees? What's the percent you have raised for the employees for this next fiscal year?
3% for the annual review, and for the COLA that came out at 8.7%, we're providing a 6%.
So up to 6% or up to 9%?
It would be up to 9. 6% is approved for
Okay.
COLA by the board, and then for the merit annual reviews, up to 3%.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? All right. Call the vote on Article 5. All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? Article 5 passes. Article 6. Paul?
Shall the Merrimack Village District vote to establish a contingency fund pursuant to RSA 52:4-A by raising and appropriating the amount of $20,000 to meet the cost of unanticipated expenses that may arise during the fiscal year 2023 to 2024, with said funds to come from water-related charges.
And you move that to the floor?
I
Do I
do.
have a second?
I'll second that.
Don seconds. Any discussions on Article 6?
Tom Koenig, 1 Danforth Road. Maybe you could just read for the audience what this is about. So this is an annual contingency fund. You're raising $20,000 And if you spend it, you're going to put it in the annual report how you spent it. And if you don't spend it, it goes into the unreserved funds, or what happens to this if you don't spend it?
It lapses.
It lapses and goes where? Back to the taxpayers or the ratepayers?
It would go back into the unassigned
Why
fund
don't you
balance,
have
the unrestricted
2.9
net
million
position.
in unassigned funds? Why don't you just take the 20,000 out of there, for crying out loud?
Pardon?
You have 2.9 million in unassigned funds, is that right?
That's in our unassigned fund balance presently, correct?
And we're worrying about $20,000 we're going to raise from the water rates. You can't find 20,000 and 2.9 million to put in your contingency fund? I mean, it lapses, you're going to raise it in rates, and then you're going to lapse it into the unassigned fund, and then raise it the next year in rates and lapse it into the unassigned funds if you don't spend it. Why don't we just take it out of the unassigned funds each year and say, this is our contingency, if you got that much money floating around?
Aren't we limited to what we can draw from those unassigned funds? I'm not sure if that.
I didn't know that we could draw from them for operational.
Do you me to answer that? Okay. So I don't know what your unassigned fund balance is percentage-wise, but as long as I think it's, Paul, it's either 5 or 8% of your operating.
Well, ours is
Well, it's
different because we're a
50%.
standalone village.
But as long as you have sufficient unassigned fund balance, you could pull the 20,000 from unassigned fund balance. But this article would have to be amended to do that.
I propose an amendment to change the direction of this fund from rates to unassigned fund balance.
Do you have the wording for that?
No. I need some help from a legal person to help me understand how the wording would have to be. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance. Article 7 says exactly what I want. The sum to come from unassigned fund balance. Instead of raising it from rates. Where did I lose it? Funds to, yeah, it says right now that funds to come from water-related charges. I would amend it to say funds to come from unassigned fund balance. If I could get a second.
Do I have a second on that? State your name. She's going to need to, just, you get that?
Nancy Murphy.
Nancy Murphy. Just taking notes. We're good. Go ahead.
I think I've already said it, but it seems a little silly to have 2.9 million, which is almost 40-something plus % of your annual budget, sitting in unassigned fund balance, and you're raising $20,000 in additional water rates to put into a contingency fund that you might not even spend with that large of a budget in the midst of everything else that you're spending money on. So it just seems appropriate to me. Thank you.
Thank you. We are discussing the amendment now.
Chris Christensen, 27 Greatstone Drive.
Thank you.
I think we've had this discussion before, and one of the points that has come up in the past, if I recall correctly, is you need a line item in order to spend money on particular objects or particular projects. And so by putting the word contingency in there, it's a very broad word that allows spending. It doesn't really matter if it's $20,000 or $1. It's a matter of getting a line item in there so that there's some broad authority to spend.
Any other comments on the amendment, which is to change the fund source from funds to come from water-related charges to funds come from unassigned fund balance? Is that correct? All right. No other comments on that? We are now voting on that change to this article. All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? Motion passes. We are now discussing Article 6 as amended. Any other comments on the amended article? Seeing none, we will vote on the amended article. All in favor? Thank you. All opposed? Article passes. On to Article 7. Don?
Sure. Shall the Merrimack Village District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 to add to the district's non-capital reserve fund for the purpose of purchasing water and/or operations and maintenance of GAC treatment facilities? This sum to come from unassigned fund balance. If Article 3 fails, then this article will be null and void. And I move that.
That's moved. Do we have a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Any discussion on Article 7? Seeing none, we will be voting on Article 7. All those in favor, raise your card. Thank you. All opposed? Article 7 passes. On to Article 8. Ken?
Shall the Merrimack Village District vote to raise the appropriate sum of $52,500 under provision of RSA 35-1, and Roman numeral 2 to add to the district system development capital reserve fund for the future system expansions and improvements of the existing system. This sum is to come from the unassigned fund balance. These are the system development charges collected during the 2021-2022 budget year.
Have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on Article 8?
Tom Koenig, 1 Danforth Road. Just to be clear, these are funds you've already collected that went into the unassigned balance, and you're just putting them into the capital reserve fund. Yep. Thank you.
Anyone else on Article 8? Seeing none? All those in favor? Thank you. All those opposed? Article passes. Article 9. John?
Shall the Merrimack Village District vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $200,000 on the provisions of RSA 35-1, 1 and 2 to the district's equipment and facilities capital reserve fund or the associated costs with existing storage, transmission, and production of water. This sum to come from the unassigned fund balance. So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on Article 9?
Tom Koenig, 1 Danforth Road. Can you tell us how much is in these capital reserve funds that we're adding funds to? Specifically now for the equipment and facilities capital reserve.
As of February 28th, we have almost $3.2 million.
$3.2 million in this capital reserve fund. And how much have we spent out of it in the past years?
In the past years,
Year or a couple of years?
we took almost $1 million out when we were doing some of the water treatment plant projects. And right now, we're not due back to reimburse just some small items. So that's what currently we have, like the 3.2. We don't have anything slated to be withdrawn from that, but we will be moving. I'm sorry, that was a different warrant article.
I guess the next question is, if it's a capital reserve fund, do you have a capital reserve plan that's going to spend this money over 7 years or something, and that's why you're having to put an additional 200 in with this 3-something million?
Yes, we have a CIP You want to speak to it? We have a CIP plan, as well as we did get an asset management grant to help us further develop and fine-tune our CIP plan. So we're going to be working on that over the next year.
And this amount of money is necessary to fund that expected expenses over the next 7 years or so.
Yes.
It's also a savings account in a sense for if there's any kind of major work that needed to be done, unexpected, well goes down, something like that, within a pump, within a well house, that we would have a fund to go to for this as well.
So this fund, I presume the commissioners are agents to expend,
Yes.
and you can spend it on anything? It sounded like you just said if something happens that we don't like or weren't expecting, we can spend money on it out of this fund?
Equipment related, with the transmission of water. Equipment related to the transmission of water, so.
In the production of water?
Yeah.
Okay, or transmission of it?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion on Article 9? Seeing none, all those in favor, please raise your cards. Thank you. All those opposed? Article passes. Article 10. Lucky Paul.
I know, right? Amend current bylaw 2B deposits, charges, and payments. From, now this is what it currently is, B, charges for service under rates in the tariff are predicted upon billing quarterly, which, as far as practicable, will be 3 months apart and due upon presentation. Should any MVD bill remain unpaid after 30 days from the date of the invoice, the district may discontinue service as well as apply a carrying charge on the overdue amount if the proper payment or arrangements have not been made. Further, the district may record a notice of lien in the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds by stating the name of the owner of the property, the address, and the amount due pursuant to the district bylaws and terms and conditions. This lien shall be removed when the overdue account plus all costs and fees authorized by the district bylaws and terms and conditions have been paid together with the reasonable costs and attorney's fees associated with the recording of such lien. We want to change it to charges for service under rates in the tariff are predicted upon billing monthly, which as far as practicable will be 30 days apart and due upon presentation. Should any MVD bill remain unpaid after 30 days from the date of the invoice, the district may discontinue service as well as apply a carrying charge on the overdue account, if proper payment or arrangements have not been made. Further, the district may record a notice of lien in the Hillsborough County Registry of Deeds stating the name of the owner of the property, the address, and the amount due pursuant to the district bylaws and terms and conditions. This lien shall be removed when the overdue account plus all costs and fees authorized by the district bylaws and terms and conditions have been paid together with the reasonable costs and attorney's fees associated with the recording of such lien.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Discussion?
Just to clarify, all that being said, we're going from quarterly to monthly billing.
Any other comments on Article 10? Seeing none, please raise your card in favor. Thank you. Opposed? Article 10 passes. And this is something new to me, Article 11.
Yes, Article 11.
Go ahead, you have the floor.
So at this time, I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate Paul McLaughlin. He is leaving his position, and we want to give him a little going-away present. let me read it, what it says. This is a plaque to Paul McLaughlin, 2023, in appreciation of 3 years of service as a commissioner for the Merrimack Village District. And Paul took on a different role in his company, and his schedule is very challenging, so he decided to step back and give an opportunity to a new commissioner, and that will allow him to spend more time on his role in the planning board that he also has. So thanks for your service, Paul. We appreciate it.
During the break, there was a few voters who wanted to ask a few questions. Did you want to ask a question or two now, or are you all set? You're good? You're good. All right. So now we're pretty much done, except for waiting for the polls to close, which will happen at 9:03? 9:03. And then the absentee ballots will be processed. So you can hang out. Great. Thank you. It's 9:03 at this time. I am closing the polls for the election of officers. I am also closing the polls for ballot voting on Article 4. At this time, we're going to be processing the absentee ballots and counting the votes. All right. Thank you. For Article 1, Commissioners, John Lyons, 23 votes. Antonio Giancola, thank you, 18 votes. District Clerk, Jill Lavoie, 22 votes. Thanks to all the winners. Article... I'm going to fine you $1. Keep quiet. All right. Article 4, the Penshot contract. It needed a, what was it, 3/5? Yes, 3/5, and it passed 16 yes, 4 no. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Tom, seconded by Tom. We're good. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening.